All right, welcome back to the Kingdom Point of View. We still here dealing with marriage. We finna close it out today. We already started with those who paying attention and the viewers and those in the audience just as well as on the call. We started with love, then we dealt with trust and truth, commitment, then respect, submission, knowledge, and now we finna move on to our 8th, 9th, and 10th so we can close out this marriage situation and understand to get you moving along on our first session on marriage and trying to get some of these core principles down pack, and hopefully you can go back and review the session that we're going to put in place or have put in place so that you can kind of reiterate on some things that can help you along. Maybe that's something that you already had some pre-ideas about marriage, and maybe you've done it for one reason or the next, but hopefully here on the Kingdom Point of View, along with those who are coming in just as well, and the insight that we have from the book that we've coming out of, one of Miles Monroe's book here today on love, the purpose of love and marriage. But we're dealing with right now that marriage is still a good idea. So if I can get one of my audience members that we can move along, can we start with number 8? We on number 8 today, and that's going to deal with respect. Faithfulness.
Faithfulness is closely related to commitment and also has a lot to do with trust. When we speak of faithfulness in marriage, we most often have sexual relations in mind. Faithful partners will be true, reserving sexual expression exclusively for each other. This is why many married couples who were sexually active before marriage often have trouble in their relationship. The basic element of faithfulness is missing. Even if they pledge to be faithful to each other, there's always that shadow of doubt. It doesn't take much for that shadow to become a dark storm cloud looming over everything. Marital faithfulness involves more than just sexual fidelity. Being faithful to your wife also means defending her and affirming her beauty, intelligence, and integrity at all times, particularly before other people. Faithfulness to your husband means sticking up for him always, building him up and never tearing him down. Marital fidelity means that your spouse's health, happiness, security, and welfare take a higher place in your life than anything else except your own relationship with the Lord.
Absolutely, young lady. That's very well read. Faithfulness. We're going to start with this and get some comments just as well as we go over what was read, and hopefully those who are viewing just as well followed along and listen at us very carefully. Like I say, we're dealing with faithfulness on this one, and we're going to break some components down, and as we get with some of the audience members as they want to respond, but just starting off, it gave a great illustration about faithfulness, I would have to say, but those things, knowing that in the breakdown of faithfulness, how I learned and studied that, faith within itself is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. So if you have that in the beginning of the fullness, okay, as it teaches in the word that the fullness part comes in a term of completion, okay? So if you had the substance of things hoped for in completion, then faithfulness will begin to make sense even deeper because it's all intertwined with what God has already subscribed for us to do. And I'm going to kind of park it right there for a second before I move along to give some of the audience members a chance to respond just as well. Yes, sir, young man.
I love the way it talks about when it talks about faithfulness, about being able to defend each other's name. It talks about making sure that you're able to cover her
right.
integrity when she's not around, as well as what it is to be faithful to that to him as well. I think that's an important component because a lot of times when you think about faithfulness, a lot of times we only see it from a perspective of infidelity. But I like that he talks about it here. What faithfulness is to even make sure that I cover your name when you're not around, because that's important too in a marriage, to make sure that when you're with your sister, your auntie, you're not having conversation about your spouse, something that will downgrade or make your spouse look bad. Because I always tell people your spouse is a reflection of your intelligence, because you picked them. At some point you picked them. So that means that they're your decision, and so you stand with them when it comes to different things, and you don't go into conversation that downgrades them or belittle them in any way. And if you have something, then you bring them forth, and you all are able to talk about it. But you don't go and have sidebar conversation that destroys the person that you're with. I think that is important on both sides
That's
in
it.
order for the marriage to produce the fruit that it's supposed to produce in its time and its season. Don't mean things won't happen, but you make a conscious effort to say we won't do this to each other, because words, what we were told was that
Yes, sir.
sticks and stone may break my bone, but words will never hurt. That's the biggest lie ever told. Words hurt to the core, and you don't get to go back and erase them. You don't get to change them. So we want to
All
be
right.
careful, and especially in a marriage with a person who you made a vow that you're gonna wake up every morning to them, that you're the first person I want to see in the morning and the last person at night. So you want to make
Yes,
sure
sir.
that you're putting in what it takes, and so that faithfulness it's a work, because it's a work to say I'm not gonna do anything. I'm gonna respect you in your face and behind your back, and I'm gonna hold your name on both sides, and I won't let anybody else do anything to you. I
Right.
won't find it okay if my mama disrespect my wife. I don't find it okay
That's it.
if my mama walk in and say you get it first. No, my wife come first. So you'll put people within a healthy perspective, and I think that's a lot of times what happen in relationships is sometimes people don't understand the importance of that new union that you have, the
Yes,
two
sir.
becoming one flesh. It is strictly about that person, and I like how he puts it. Other than your relationship with Christ, this person becomes
That's right.
number one in your life, and vice versa. So everybody's taking care of each other with that faithfulness. I think that's really good.
Absolutely, young man. Just to have a little rebuttal and a continuation, like you said, that was very powerful. Um, with that part, especially with that spouse, and two becoming one flesh, under that and understanding that in totality, I would have to agree that that may be one of the substance things that have been missed. Just like the lesson is saying that when we're joining each other in what has happened on these marriages so far, because the evidence have became of the divorces being 50% or higher. So we have to conclude that there's something missing in the foundation, like you said, and it can easily. And I love that example you said about the old saying about sticks and stone may break my bone, but word won't hurt you. That is definitely in agreement. Was not, it was slighted. But the words are very definite. In the scriptures talk about how a woman can tear a house down, with her hand. And that whole concept deal with how it has already laid out how the spouses should protect each other, have the idea, the marital fidelity being with the whole goal outside of God. That first thought should be about the health, the happiness, the security, the welfare, and those type of things should be taking place, in that regards to one another. And when you're keeping them in a high regard, then it'll keep you in the mindset of that protection. And just like you said, young man, that as it said in the lesson, that even when you're talking with your mother, your grandmother, your friends, or whomever that may used to be influential before you came into the kingdom concept or the marital concept on how it should be according to the word of God, is really boiling down back to order. What is the order of things on how they should be? And although those are cultural things, although they are considered habits, but those are no excuses when it comes to how God has already orchestrated how marriage should be. And that's the things that is being talked about now, how it should be, so that we can begin to practice in that manner, and definitely dealing with faithfulness. That faithfulness is definitely key, because those components are going to be very evident as well, whether you are or you not. And we can move forward a little bit on that. Young lady, what you have for us on that statement dealing with faithfulness? Yes, ma'am.
Well, looking at the text, I think a lot of times we have to just change our mindset. I like to say change my filter, because it's so easy for us to just jump to the conclusion of faithfulness having something to do with infidelity, and that not always having to be the case. It also talks about a hierarchy, in the order in which things are supposed to happen. But one thing that I noticed that the text really doesn't expound on, it does say, that you're supposed to protect your spouse in the presence of other people. Don't talk bad about them. I would say that a band-aid can only cover so much. So when you are maybe in spat with your significant other, and then you turn around and you vocalize that to a friend or a family member, and then you come back to your spouse and they apologize, and then y'all have a conversation about it, and then it heals because you put the Band-Aid on it the right way.
Correct.
But you never took the time to put any Neosporin, no peroxide, or anything else on the conversation that you had with the other person. And rightfully so, even if you did try, it was still there.
True.
And it's not going to heal the same way. So I would go as far as to say that conversation, even be it good or bad, you don't need to give too much information about what's too good. You don't need to give too much information about what's bad, because the too good could be just as damaging to your surroundings, whether you know it or not.
All right.
That's what I would say.
Absolutely, young lady, you are definitely correct. Too much good news can be a problem. You might tell them that some people might be using a natural sweetener, and somebody might use honey, and somebody might be using syrup, and then you might tell them something that is sweet and which one you using, and that might be the particular one that they like. So I understand what a young lady is saying, that sometimes something too sweet, too good can be wrong, just as well as trying to orchestrate the idea that once you have amended something within your spouse with something, but you've already verbalized to someone else, like the young lady said, that has and can be a real problem when it comes to, especially dealing with other friends and family, and they just don't see it the same way or either get the same substance, like the young lady said. That's a very great point that can be added into here, just like you said, in that faithfulness, because correlate, like the lesson is saying, that protection, if it never did happen, then we wouldn't have to worry about trying to fix it. And so that comes back to order once again. And that's where the discipline has to come in, knowing that, like the young man said, that two becoming one flesh, that this is a reflection of you. This is, you made the choice, so you got to be that much careful, or as the streets say, on your toes, on your P's and Q's. So make sure that you kind of try to stay ahead of these things by not even putting others in the position, and then we won't have to worry about fixing it, like the young lady said, putting that Band-Aid on it. I ain't got enough Neosporin peroxide to clean it up now. It just don't went a little bit too far. But that's a great point that also can make sure that we understand, those who viewing just as well as listening, that keeping that faithfulness and keeping that wholeness together is very important in securing your own self from having to deal with some things that you don't have to. Yes. Let's move on to the next one. Patience. Anyone want to read patience for me?
I got you. Patience is another central foundation stone for building a successful and happy marriage. Why? Marriage brings together two totally different people with different experiences, different backgrounds, different temperaments, different likes and dislikes, and sometimes even different cultures. Because of these differences, both partners will have to make major adjustments in their lives and attitudes if their marriage is to succeed. Some bumps and bruises along the way are inevitable. She may wear her hair in a way he doesn't like. He may drive her up the wall with his habits of leaving his dirty clothes lying around everywhere. They may have conflict regarding expectations, money management, use of leisure time, sex, parenting, any number of things. The critical key in dealing with conflict and adjustment to differences is patience. Both partners will need truckloads of it. Again, he said both partners will need truckloads of it.
That's all right, young man. I know you emphasize that last part. Say both partners will need truckloads of it. If you say truckload, that's like a dump truck or something that got loads, and we already know that's pushing some real heavy stuff out there. It's loaded up, but absolutely, patience is definitely necessary, because when two people are coming together, like I already explained, and many other examples for those who are listening, how patient are we? Or are we trying to, they say sometimes in this day and age, we want a microwave. We want a microwave. Ain't nobody willing to cook it like old school old school used to. You know, what other ingredients you use? How patient are you, or do you need it very quick? Some things that we don't have patience on can cost us one way or another, but it's all about a mindset, which has already been discussed here earlier about a young lady said about changing your mindset, the way you think. And once you have an idea of patience, you have to have that type of understanding, knowing that you're coming with somebody, that your habits and their habits are joining into, using what the young man said again in marriage, two are becoming one flesh. And the example did give in the message about him probably leaving his dirty clothes down, or her hair a certain way, which is, two good illustrations. Or we can add to it what the man could be used to leaving the toilet seat up unconsciously, and then the woman know that she's used to it being down, and that could start a uproar, but you have to be patient and hope that you can communicate in a way from patience. And that's what gives you a chance to have that understanding that, okay, we're coming together. There are some adjustments that have to happen, especially when you're not living together or haven't visited each other enough, because some people do gather a sense of understanding and knowing who you're dealing with and never have actually been in the same household for a long period of time. Some people work a lot and they've already been married. And let's just say that I know in one of the professions, work with the railroad, you have young men and maybe some young women just as well. They be off at work, at a time, weeks and months, and yet and still, based on a numerical interpretation, they've been married 5 years. But truly, they've only spent time 2 months based on the time. So they still don't even know each other in a way. And now that patience is not there. There's a misunderstanding, like, well, we've been together so long, you should know, but time spent, and what wasn't already in here, is the substance that's in that statement dealing with patience. Time spent will help bond these type of things and give a better understanding from that perspective. But I ain't gonna walk too far. I'm gonna let one of the audience members or whomever want to respond. Yes, sir, young man. Help us out.
I definitely go in the same way what you were saying about patience. Outside of finances being one of the major things that cause divorce, patience is a lot of time the issue, because you have to give each other the grace to grow into what you dreamed it could be or what you thought it would be. You have to give each other that grace and that space, because you have, like you said, two people he gave the example, two different people from two totally different backgrounds, and you put them together and you saying make this thing work. And sometimes what I consider my norm may be totally different than somebody else's norm, and so you have things like somebody might, for Christmas, somebody might have always brought presents, and then the other person may say, we never do that for Christmas. So you have to be patient with what they've been through, and even if you somewhere they haven't gotten to yet, you have to be patient enough, because as you walk down the road of marriage, you're gonna find different things that everybody gonna have to have patience with each other on. And in those moments, it is difficult. But because you're saying to yourself, why can't they just do it this way? If they just did it this way, then we wouldn't have any issues. But everybody need that level of patience, and that patience is, I'm gonna keep working with you. And the only way you're gonna get patient is to deal with a situation that calls for you to have to operate in patience. And so that means it's gonna be a situation or some level of conflict that you'll have to deal with, that you'll have to work with, something that's gonna be a recurring, something that y'all have made in your mind. We're gonna agree to disagree on. I squeeze from the top, you squeeze toothpaste from the bottom. It's small things that cause arguments in marriage that sometimes are never resolved, because to tell people, oftentimes when people get married, they think of Cinderella, happily ever after, but it's gonna be some things that you're gonna have to walk through, you have to go through. And when you have an issue with your spouse, the music don't come on after 30 minutes and everything work out. Sometimes it takes hours and days to work out whatever they may be. Yes, but to agree to say that you're worth waiting on, to that spouse you're worth waiting on, that mean they're gonna be, because both of us gonna have some places that we gotta grow in, because that's part of the natural process of the marriage. Because who y'all are when y'all first walk in, you're gonna be shaped into something different, because two people coming together, you might have didn't eat onions before. You might say, I never eat onions on my hot dog. Now I love onions on my hot dog. Why? Because I'm with my spouse and I taste it one day, and now I put onions on my hot dog. It's the little thing that you'll pick up along the way, little things they do. Don't watch the show without them. It's just a little small thing. That's right. After a while, y'all find your groove. And so to me, patience is about finding y'all groove, not what mama and daddy did, not what grandmama and granddaddy did. But how do we find our pace? What do we look like? On Thanksgiving, we might want to do a crab ball, something totally different than everybody else doing. We may want to cook barbecue on Thanksgiving. That's so good. Whatever y'all vibe is, whatever y'all have to find your own temperature and say, this may bother somebody else. Somebody else married may can't endure this, but this is what we decided to do, because this is what worked for us, and this, it may work one way or the other way with a couple. So that's what I would say with the patience. I think that's a key component because you have to realize, look, as much as I am perfect, there's some imperfection I bring into the equation when I walk into the marriage too, and everybody does,
Great point.
and that's just how I see that from that perspective.
Great point, young man. Very great point. Those are some very key components. I learned this in study just as well about the cookbook. It was said, Miles Monroe talked about how we look at the pictures, and you made a statement about it, and that's what brought it to me, the image statement, that we look at the cookbooks and we automatically see the pictures, and that's what we're expecting. On the kingdom point of view, we always call it unrealistic expectations. And he talks about, as we talked on other shows before, about the ingredients and the recipe. And so because of that, we have this expectation and we're not patient enough to follow through with the right ingredients and definitely the right recipe, meaning that we have to be who we're supposed to be and understanding that whatever ingredients that we're mixing in, trying to accomplish this image of what we're utilizing metaphorically would be the marriage, this ending goal that we perceptually see, flower bed of ease, so to speak, then we got to have the right ingredients in order, or components, as we say on the kingdom point of view, to make sure that we're able to even start the process. The ingredients are just the start of it. Okay, and then the recipe is doing it in the right order. And that's what the study lesson thus far is talking about on certain things that are ingredients, but there's an order in order to have the recipe done a certain way for it to come out exactly how that image is. And that's a very great illustration just as well. Yes, ma'am, you have something to help us out with?
Well, I was thinking when I was smaller, I don't know how old I was, but my mother, I said something to her about praying for patience. And she basically bit my head off. She said, "You never pray for patience. You ask God for the longevity to get through it." So I guess if I were writing this, and it's well written, but if I was, then patience would also have slash grace slash time, because there's never going to be a situation where you can get every facet of your partner in a 24-hour period. You can't get every facet of their personality or their nuances or their behaviors, their habits, their temperaments. You can't get that in 6 months. You can't get it in 10 years. You'll still be learning after 50. So I think that the rush for us to get the picture leads us to erase a lot of the steps and the time that it takes to cultivate the relationship. And we don't necessarily do a good enough job of looking in the mirror and analyzing ourselves about our patience. I know I have patience issues. I know that about myself. I know there are certain things that get on my nerves. But guess what? I know that they get on my nerves, so I communicate that to my partner that gets on my nerves. I don't like it. And that helps me not to necessarily get rid of what gets on my nerves, but the adjustment can be made in order to deal with it and to give grace when it don't happen the way that you want it to happen, and to not snap when it's I told you I don't like this. I told you, that's one of my pet peeves. But it's going to take time to build, I would say, a callus towards that. If it's something that you have to have patience to deal with, it's going to take time and grace. So that's what I would say about it.
Yes, ma'am. That's a great point. Just as well.
Real good.
You utilized it. The young man said it there about grace, and you came to sum it up with time and grace. Like you said, if you was writing it just as well, and that's what we all about here on the Kingdom Point of View. We getting a lot of great substance from the responses just as well as just what's already written in the book, and hopefully those who are viewing just as well. You have to be able to utilize the origin things, the precepts is what gonna help you get through, and the foundational things, and definitely. Explaining that patience from these responses we have so far has been great. because the young man did emphasize from the beginning when he finished reading, he said both partners will need a truckload of it. So that is exactly what it's all about, how the young lady is playing. She is playing it from a truckload. And I learned this just as well. I mean, it was said in studies, said that you always, listen, viewers, you always have to continue learning your spouse. Mm-hmm. Always. Indeed. It's never done. Because we grow in different ages and different times. And one of the young men, Mr. Butler, said on one of the other shows, he said they might have liked this type of food at this point in the relationship, and later on they like something else, and then you end up buying the same type of food, and then they say they don't like it, because we got to pay attention and continue learning our spouses day in and day out. And as long as we stay anchored into learning one another, then we won't really have a big gap of missing out on how to be patient with one another, because that's what it's all about. And we focus on that and not allowing these other things and distractions to take us away from these core principles. Then, just like the book says, marriage is still a good idea. And we roll it on to our final one right here in this first class session with marriage. And we're going to deal with this term. Is called financial stability. Financial stability is number 10 out of all the things that we've dealt with, and it's going to close out pretty good. Anyone want to read that for me? Just as well. Number 10, financial stability. Help us out.
Financial stability is one of the most often overlooked foundation stones of marriage. Many young couples who are planning to marry give little thought to the importance of entering marriage with a well-established financial base. I cannot count the number of times I have seen this for myself. A young couple comes to me and says, we'd like to get married. Are either of you working? No. Then how do you expect to make it? We're in love. We'll make it. Love will find a way. Love is certainly important, even critical, but let's be practical. Love won't pay the rent or put food on the table. Adjusting to married life is difficult and challenging enough on its own. The last thing a couple needs is to go into a marriage with a lot of minuses. Financial stability is one of the biggest minuses of all. If you're having money problems before you are married, what makes you think they will go away after you get married? The time to think about finances is before the wedding. Long before. A couple should discuss the matter frankly and honestly and have a clear financial plan in place before they take their vows. There should be a steady and dependable source of income. At the very least, the man should have steady employment. No woman, even if she has her own career and plans to continue working, should marry a man who does not have a job. If she does, she will most likely end up supporting him rather than the other way around. Financial difficulty is one of the main causes of marital failure. Never underestimate the importance of financial stability to a successful marriage.
Man, that's tough. That's tough. Financial stability. This is number 10. I see why they say sometimes, they say the best for last. They say the best for last, because that's a great summary. And I love the sarcasm in it, and it's still true that love is important. Love is important. And I've heard even over time in my short-lived life about how we know in Scripture that love covers a multitude of sin. And that's been one of the things that, and love never fails. So we take that and we understand it, and it's true. And they utilize that a lot of times to say, well, just like you said, that long as you love each other, everything gonna work out. But I love the study that has taken place so far to give an illustration that love will not pay your bills. Quite naturally, someone would say, well, if a person loves them, then they will go to work. Well, that is true in its own essence, but we're making the breakdown that a person still could have love and not have the ability to work. So love technically don't make you work. There are other components in there. You got to have your own self-esteem. You got to have your own desires. You got to You got to be as in the beginning when God had created Adam and put him in the garden. He told him to tend to the garden, to guard the garden. So working was already there. God already loved him. He was just doing what he was ordered to do. So you can actually be doing something and haven't even gave love to someone else because woman was not even created at that time. So therefore, there's an ability that we have in free will to do things, and we should line those things up and adding it to love. But definitely there are some components that when I learned also that love won't save a marriage, and it's because of all the things that we've discussed about whether we're going to be faithful, whether we're going to have respect, whether we're going to have trust, truth, commitment, love, all of these components that we are covering in this lesson, are we going to be submissive to one another? All these things are components to a successful marriage. That is what the point is all about. And remember, love was one of the first things that we covered in part one to this session right here. So there are so many components when it comes to marriage. And so before we move forward and we continue on this financial stability, let's get an audience or those who want to respond just as well a chance to respond. Yes, sir.
That financial stability, I think that's really key and really important in any marriage. In order for that marriage to be successful, you have to have a financial plan. When I look back to the audience, to those who may be listening from some other place, YouTube, or whenever you stumble upon this to listen to it, my own personal experience going into marriage being married twice. The first time I went into a marriage, the idea was I didn't even know that finance was important. And along the way, I found out about finances because different circumstances happened. My second time, I was more prepared to carry it. But still, though, I think that you have to be willing to have those in-depth conversation more than once, just like you talk about where you want to go on a honeymoon, where you want to go on your trip at, what's your dream place. You need to fully understand what is your financial plan, what do our financial picture look like, what do we want to do. It don't mean you have to be there today, but you have to have a plan because you have to have a goal that you're reaching towards. I understood that, but in totality, that has to be the depths of that conversation because with dealing with marriage counseling the first time when with me and my wife, a lot of times the number one issue always came, one of the major issues rather, I won't say the number one, but one of the major issues always came up with how people did money, how they did money. And that even, we talked about two becoming one flesh. One of the issues I think that's still on the table that we can kind of kick around today is the issue of does the money become one? Because I don't understand how y'all become one flesh, but my money is my money, your money. And if we're together and we're working towards one goal of Team Johnson or Team Jones or Team Smith, if we're working towards a goal, because if we two and we one, we're working towards the same goal. And I'm not telling anybody how to handle theirs, but it does become an issue when the words like my money and I get to do what I want to with my money because I go to work. Not in a place of dictatorship, but not saying that it's about us in totality and that money has to be working together. But people have so many different ideologies because Big Mama told me when I was a little girl, to always keep me a few dollars over here. And my granddaddy told me don't never let a woman know how much money you got. So I come in with these outdated, antiquated ideas that says this is how I'm supposed to see money. And so now you have somebody who's saying, I'm used to, putting it all on credit card. Then, they say sometimes you got champagne taste with bill money. And so they have a different opinion when it comes down to the idea of what it should be. So financial stability has to become important. It is because it will wreck a marriage when you don't have financial stability. A lot of people kick around the idea, even in marriage, about prenup. Should you have a prenup?
Oh, man.
If it's more than love, to say that marriage is more than love, but there's also a financial contract between two people. So how do you hash that out in the idea of I love you? But it could be a place where we may decide that love is going east and love is going west today, But then the question does become, is that love? So I would go with that. But when it comes down to financial stability, I think that has to be as one audience member said, it has to be an ongoing conversation so
That's
we
it.
understand where we're at with the finances. Because if I'm saying, if I'm study saying save and you study saying spend, we on two different planes.
That's it.
And so that has to be important. Even in two believers, a lot of times you have some
Mm-hmm.
believers. I've heard people say, I'm just believing by faith. They ain't gonna cut the lights off. You're
Mm.
gonna be in the dark. So you gotta have a better strategy. I'm gonna believe by faith that God gonna work it out. Something gonna happen. Hope is
Tough
not a
on me,
strategy.
buddy.
So
Tough.
but that's
Tough.
how I look at it when it comes down to
All
financial
right.
stability. And I love to hear y'all take on it.
Oh, young man, you got me tilted up here, man. Listen at your statement because they are absolutely correct. I mean, 100% better. Ain't no better way to say it. You definitely took marriage on. I'm glad financial stability was the last one because I don't even think we could have went 1 through 9 after hearing what you said. Because that is some foundational stuff in marriage, and true enough, in kingdom principles, learning that in the Word of God, and it's already written there. It's just a matter of whether we're willing to be self-accountable, like I heard within ourselves, look at ourselves in the mirror, and to be honest with ourselves. That's why the things that came after love was trust and truth. Who's willing to be honest with themselves? And honest enough to say this is exactly where I'm at. And to answer those questions, I just want to show that all these foundational things are there. But when it comes to the finance, it says that in the beginning it tells us about how can two walk together unless they agree. Okay, that's a part of marriage. Okay, you can't go one way and another goes another. So you can have your finances together, but in a sense there should be some still separation on certain things. Like, take this for instance. If you wanted to be surprised and you want to buy your spouse some flowers or something, and you got one account, and every time the account is something is taken out, there's an alert, then now you just stripped away some form of a surprise. So there should be some understanding when it comes to the governing body of finances, for whomever, whatever worked for them may work on being separated, but like I learned in study like this, it's just a matter of time. Either you together or you're not on one accord. There is no in between. Either let your yes be yes and your no be no. Either you're hot or, he said, I'd rather for you to be hot or cold and not lukewarm. There is no in between. So yes, we should have a finance that is together, okay, for the best interest of the totality of the support of the family, and make sure that we have an understanding that whatever finances we have separated, they need to be understood just as well, so to speak. And that way, from a good place, and I'm talking about how a Christian marriage should be, so there's no worry about the unfaithfulness part. There's no worry about the trust and the truth part in this type of separation, meaning that we may be aware of what it is and have an idea like, okay, we are saving over here. You do have this account over here, but this bulk money that we have together for the family does this, and this money over here and this card, we know we're utilizing for surprises. Maybe you want to go buy you some tennis shoes, like that. But there has to be some type of budget planning, the planning of knowing what's going on, so that, like you said, young man, somebody should not be saving and the other one just spending, because you're on a crash course. So it's all about communication and commitment, all the things that have been discussed from that manner, and coming together with a total understanding. But the moment that there's a separation of something that's being hid, and like you said, that big mama and all these people that said, put something to the side, and you led it into one of your final statements dealing with the prenup. Those things, I will tell you that in study, it says that the devil, his whole objective is to kill, steal, and destroy. Okay? But also in that statement, he's also in the mix to create doubt, divergence, discouragement. And all these things, like I learned in study, by means two, but die means two too, a division. So anything that creates a division within the marriage, how two become one flesh, but yet become divided, it's just a matter of time. It's just on the crash course. Some people are in marriages by title, but they're settling, but not committed. So there are some mirages on some things that look like marriage, and those are some of the false pretenses that have taken place that have led people into this 50% of divorce and higher because these substance type of things are not being discussed like you laid out, young man, even though the lesson is here with this financial stability, that without, it said it with, planning, we have to have a true plan if you coming together with somebody. And that's why I mentioned about the idea of the ingredients and the recipe. If we having an idea that we want a successful marriage, okay, and it says right here in this passage up here, outline of what's being read, it says a happy marriage is no accident, okay? There's no accident because they're all, the guideline is already set. So these things that are being discussed in this financial and going back, so I don't get too far, of course, because I'm ramped up and amped up about the excitement about this topic. But that prenup, anyone, I would have to say from Kingdom Principles, reading this Word of God, studying these different books, nowhere now God has subscribed for somebody to alter, okay, what has already written to say, well, let me go ahead and this prenup. Pre means before. I learned that. Before I get married, I'm going to set aside a set of rules of my own, okay, that you're going to sign before we subscribe to God. That's the only way I see the prenup. And if you do want to have a prenup and want to get married in the idea, I would say just don't. And that way you can just have an agreement, because the prenup is an agreement. In some states they have certain types of laws that if a person stay with you so long or mail come there for so long. So go ahead and create the prenups for those who love it and think it's a great idea. But I will say this, if anyone that pretty much has a prenup in place, according to the Word of God, I don't really see where it said that two became one flesh. There's some form of separation. And when you operating in God, like I said, how can two walk together unless they agree? Yeah, they may agree on the prenup, but also there's a heaven and hell too. Some people can decide with free will to go the wrong way or the right way. But according to the Word of God, if you want to have a marriage, then the man cannot be a source and a sustainer, a protector. And like I said in the beginning, he cannot tend to the garden. He cannot protect the garden with a prenup or the idea. Matter of fact, that prenup idea, looking at that tree he didn't supposed to, what got him in trouble. I call that the prenup, all right? Doing something outside of what God already subscribed will always lead to a natural disaster, which is called out of order or disorder. And also in the sense of what they say, to rebel against God is also called a sin. Yes, ma'am, young ladies, help us out, and we can come in again on that. I don't want to walk it too far on that, but that prenup is tough. And for those who listening in, this is very good right here, and hopefully we learning something. Yes, ma'am, help us out. I hope we ain't closed too much out on him, but you've been making some great statements, and I'm glad you two will definitely come in. Y'all got plenty of meat on the bone right here for the kingdom point of view. Help us out.
The terminology is prenuptial agreement. So, in essence, if we were already walking steps 1 through 9, we were already pre-understanding what we understood each other to want out of it in the first place, prior to the marriage. And then the agreement would have already come from that understanding. So by the time we got to the financial portion of it in step 10, it would have already been discussed. Now, if you still feel like after you done walked 1 through 9 and then you get through 10, that you need a prenuptial agreement, you don't need to get married to this person, because you missed something in 1 through 9 before you got here that makes you think that there's a possibility that this may not go according to plan. And even if it doesn't go according to plan, I'm not saying that people can't be in relationship the right way. Then something happens in life where they want to pursue something, they don't agree on it, or whatever the case may be. You may want to part ways. But if that's the case, then even if you do part ways, there should be nothing in your mind that says that this person is going to do me a certain type of way if I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, to where I have to feel as though in advance I need to protect this, that, and the other, and the third. Now, Mr. Butler did bring up a good point. He mentioned the fact that back in the day, you would hear from your grandmother, put you something to the side, baby, because you never know. That's because grandma didn't have a choice. And it's a possibility that the way she got married is was out of obligation or was out of I need someone to care for me, and now I have these children and I need him to care for all of us. I can't do it, or that's his role. Now I do remember something. I can't recall where in which one it was, but how Monroe just kind of broke down before the war and after the war. There were men that were working in factories and they were building and things of that nature, and the women were at home. That was their role, and they were clearly defined. There was an understanding that the man is going to go to work, he's going to get the money, he's going to bring it home, and then he's going to provide for the household. The wife is going to take that money and do what needs to be done with it, whatever the case may be. It was a clearly defined set of expectations and roles. There's also an Old Testament and a New Testament. There was a change in the Bible. So they didn't say that this Old Testament is going to be the end all be all and that's it, and we're not making no revision. So if they even made a revision in the Bible to bring something up to code nowadays, then I would assume that we can take what grandma said about it and adjust what needs to happen now. Financial stability, I would say, would have a lot to do with Habakkuk. Write the vision and make it plain. So we can take the knowledge that was there, because that's how we build upon making things better. We took the knowledge of surgeries and medicines and things of that nature that were in the past, and we made them better. That's why we have the advancements that we have now. But the prenuptial agreement, if you have to have any indication that you even considering that you might need one, then I think you need to go back to step one and walk it again.
Yes, ma'am. That's a great point. I mean, you definitely clear cut on that, and that was a great illustration just as well. I'm gonna go back to that statement you said. It was the war machine. We talked about that definitely on 1 hour show just as well on how to maintain a healthy marriage. Was actually that show. As I gave an illustration about on how the men was going to work when the time of war, like you said, young lady, and the women were still at home, and that was one of the statements one of the callers made that day in maintaining a healthy marriage. So it's all lined back up with this study, and it all is definitely very clear. And that prenuptial, like the young man said, have got us in a good deal right here, making the adjustments on knowing what's taking place. And that was a great illustration, young lady, in the Old Testament. Like you said, that was a revision from the Old Testament to the New, because of Jesus Christ already being prophesied that he gonna come to make sure that he put things back in order from that perspective, so that the sacrificial lamb was healed by the shedding of the blood to give us that redemption. He was our redeemer. So there's some redeemed, there's some new things. And anyone that understands what a will is, then you will even give a better substance on what the Bible is actually illustrating from the terminology. Have you ever heard these terms, for those who are viewing just as well and listening? A will and testament. A will and testament. So when you have a will and testament, when you're dealing with the Bible, you had the New Testament, and now you have you had the Old Testament, and now you have the New Testament. That's whatever what was prescribed prior to, and then what we call also in the end game. This is what was said, and this is what written in stone to make sure that we follow the guidelines that's written just as well, like the young lady was trying to illustrate. So when Jesus came on the scene, he made it very clear. Quite naturally, it was said that Moses had prescribed and tried to make an amendment to a lot of confusion that was happening in marriage, and gave a little leeway for divorce according to what was taking place from his standpoint. But at the same time, God never personally subscribed for anyone to be divorced. And that's what these things are designed for, like the young lady and young man were discussing. If we follow the order, then we could better prepare ourselves, because it's all about the precepts. Getting the precepts to marriage, understanding what it should be prior to, according to the word of God, not according to grandmama and granddad and mama and brother and sister and friend who are made in most cases be given emotional decisions based on their experiences. And experiences have their place, but one thing about it, your experiences are only based upon your knowledge, understanding, and your wisdom. And hopefully that we've learned a lot from this session. I definitely love that closing point of financial stability coming through this 1 through 10. But I know this session right here is just one of the things that we're going to deal with on marriage here as we move along with many more. But I found it in myself to go over this part in the study about that marriage is still a great idea, and that a good marriage, a happy marriage, is no accident. And once we understand these principles, anyone who's following this guideline 1 through 10, I don't really see nowhere where we can kind of be fickled away from any situation. Like the young lady said, we have to go backwards, and that's what it's all about. Check ourselves, examine ourselves to make sure before we take those steps that we don't enter into something with too much doubt or any doubt that causes us to spread something that will grow. As it said in the lesson, I already discussed about even opening them type of doors. I want to say it was dealing in faithfulness at the part where it talked about in that relationship. And when something is missing, it said that you will have a lot of trouble. And it says that there is always that shadow of a doubt. And you open that door. So the best thing is to try to keep that door closed and don't allow certain things to come in. But here on the Kingdom Point of View, we've definitely enjoyed this session right here on marriage. And we hopefully that we helping somebody this 1 through 10 right here on a Christian marriage. And we have many more that's coming just as well. So if you want to join the show, you can hit the email just as well here on the Kingdom Point of View, or come into the studio. We'll love to have you, just as well as your comments and statements just as well. But until next time, we'll see you on the Kingdom Point of View.